In the previous video, we started discussing about the government budget, and we saw that there are two kinds of budgets within the government budget called the revenue budget and the capital budget. In this video, we're going to discuss about them. Okay. So the revenue budget contains revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. Revenue receipts are classified into tax receipts and non-tax receipts. Right, in the previous video itself we said that revenue receipts has tax revenue and non-tax revenue, right? So these are classified into tax receipts and non-tax receipts. Tax receipts are further classified into direct tax revenue and indirect tax revenue. So revenue receipts are classified into tax revenue and non-tax revenue, and tax revenue is further classified into direct tax revenue and and indirect tax revenue. So what are the examples of direct tax revenue? Income tax, corporate tax. Income tax is paid by individuals like you and me. Corporate tax is paid by companies like, let's say, Tata, Mahindra, etc. All of these people pay corporate tax, that is paid by companies. Property tax, capital gains tax, etc. are all forms of direct taxes, but they do not accrue to the central government. Okay, but they are examples of direct taxes. Property tax, capital gains tax, and all goes to the state government because land is a state subject. Okay, so these are examples of direct taxes. Now, if you look at indirect taxes, you have goods and service tax, that is GST. That is an example of revenue from indirect tax. Other examples of indirect taxes includes custom duties, security transaction tax, stamp duty, etc. If you have ever traded in equities or forex, then you would know that every time you trade there is a security transaction tax or STT that is there in your that is there in charges, right? So again, security transaction tax or stamp duty, these are all examples of indirect tax. So direct tax revenue, indirect tax revenue, both are under revenue tax receipts. Okay, now non-tax revenue. What are the examples of non-tax revenue for the central government? This mainly consists of interest receipts on account of loans by the central government. Now, let's say the central government has given loan to some company, some big startup, right? Let's say Tata Technologies, that is a new company that is coming up, right? Let's say the government has given 1,000 crores as a loan to Tata Technologies, and Tata Technologies is giving 10% interest on this 1,000 crore rupee loan. Then 10% of 1,000 crores is 100 crores in revenue. So the interest that is received on account of loans that has been given by the central government, this comes under non-tax revenue. So the first one is interest receipts on account of loans given by the central government. Second one, dividends and profits on investment made by the government. Dividends and profits means, let's say there are some government owned companies. For example, SBI. SBI is a government owned company. It's a government owned bank or a nationalized bank. Now, if SBI makes a profit, then the dividends from those shares, whatever are coming, that will come to the government, and this comes under non-tax revenue of the revenue receipts. Similarly, profits from these companies, again, it comes to non-tax revenue part of the revenue receipts, right? So dividends and profits on investments made by the central government also comes under non-tax revenue. The third one, fees and other receipts for services rendered by the government. Fees and other receipts for services rendered by the government. It could be any fee, right? If the government is, let's say, giving you an encumbrance certificate and it is charging you 150 rupees, that is a fee that the government is receiving, and this also comes under non-tax revenue and it comes under revenue receipts. Any cash grants in aid from foreign countries and international organizations. For example, let's say we have something like WHO. If the WHO gives some kind of a grant in aid in case of a pandemic, all that money is going to come into the revenue receipts, that is into non-tax revenue part of revenue receipts. So these are the examples of revenue receipts, that is direct tax revenue, indirect tax revenue, and then you also have non-tax revenue. Under non-tax revenue, you have these four heads. I hope this is clear about revenue receipts. Now we look at revenue expenditure. Now revenue expenditure is divided into planned revenue expenditure and non-planned revenue expenditure. The main components of non-planned revenue expenditure are as follows, that is interest payments on loans taken by the government, expenditure on defense services, subsidies, both direct and indirect subsidies, including for healthcare, education, salaries and pensions of government servants, all of these come under non-planned revenue expenditure. So we will recount all the points again. So the first one that we look at is interest payments that the government has to make. Now let's say the central government has taken a loan from some body. Let's say you have taken a loan of 10,000 crores and you're paying an interest rate of 5%. That means you have to pay 500 crores as interest now. So this interest payment will happen through revenue expenditure and particularly through non-planned revenue expenditure. Okay. Second one, expenditure on defense services. This is again non-planned revenue expenditure. Now let's say you give subsidies. For example, 1 kg of rice in a city costs 50 rupees. But subsidized rice is available in ration shops at 2 rupees or 3 rupees or 1 rupee depending on the state. So all of these subsidies also come under non-planned revenue expenditure of the budget. It's not, these are direct subsidies. There are a lot of indirect subsidies as well. This can be for healthcare also, right? So and also salaries and pensions of government servants are also come under non-planned revenue expenditure. So this is about the revenue budget, revenue receipts and revenue expenditure. In the next video, we'll look at the capital budget, capital receipts and capital expenditure.